Facebook as well. There we go. We are live. So hi, welcome to the Mind Warrior podcast on behalf of the Mental Health Warriors. So as I always say, the Mind Warrior podcast aims to not only talk about our mental well-being, but also kind of empower listeners through connection and hearing what others have gone through and what we can do to help. So this week I feel a little bit like Davina. We're talking about menopause today, which although I think is getting better, I think it isn't talked about enough. So, 50% of the population go through it. So it's a really important topic. So I'm so pleased today to have Harriet as my guest. Hi, Harriet, who's a health coach and has been supporting women going through menopause and peri-menopause for many years now. Phenomenal work that you do, setting up like a nurture club, all the coaching support, and connecting people, the supper club, which I can't wait to talk about all these things. Before I do that, I'm just going to play our intro video, and then we'll do proper introductions after that. I forgot to warn you, Harriet, that's really loud.
That video is right here. Yeah, that's fine.
Wakes you up. Always wakes you up. So welcome, Harriet. Hi, welcome to the Mind Warrior podcast. So pleased that you're on the show. Just a reminder before we go into anything, anyone that's watching live can put any comments and we'll go through them, have a look for those. So I think that's for YouTube and for Facebook. And we'll go through those as we go through the show. So Harriet, welcome. Do you want to tell everyone a bit about you and your kind of background, what sort of a health coach means to you? Just tell us a bit more about you.
That's a difficult one, isn't it? Where do you start? So yeah, I suppose my background before health coaching was I trained as a nutritional therapist a long time ago. But then sort of didn't followed that in a different sort of way, had kids, and then went on another big journey with health and well-being and learned all about more of a holistic approach. And then it took me a long time till I found out what a health coach was. And then that was the job I should have done a long time ago. So yeah, it's taken me a journey, but yeah, I'm happy to be here doing that now. Yeah.
And it does take us on a bit of a journey, doesn't it? I always find like it's your own kind of like battles, the stuff that you go through, and then actually finally finding where you should be. It's all of that experience, which I think is you can bring to everybody else that you work with. So what about, because when you sent me over the blog the other day of your kind of journey with menopause, I just really felt that, it was quite inspiring because there's so much kind of information about it, and it's different for everybody, isn't it? So I think we don't talk about it enough. And then when you start to experience it, you can hear lots of other kind of scary stories, or some people say it was fine for me, other people it was really, really difficult. And I know for me, I started about a year ago, started to feel just really different to what I had before. I'm someone who finds it quite easy to get up in the morning and kind of go for a run or do these things. I was suddenly feeling really fatigued, really foggy headed, and just not me. Started to like put on weight when I wasn't doing anything any different. And then I didn't even click that any of these symptoms might have been sort of leading up to menopause until I skipped a period. And then I suddenly started linking it, and then realized you could be perimenopausal like 10 years before. So yeah, so tell us about your journey, because that was quite kind of up and down as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I had my mum in the background here going, we've got early menopause in the family, blah, blah, blah. So I sort of knew it was coming, I suppose. But having early menopause is quite tricky because you don't have your friends around you going through the same thing at the same time. And I was also really brought up with that whole, stiff upper lip, let's just crack on with it. Let's not talk about anything. Everything's all right kind of conditioning, which is nobody's fault. It's just they was conditioned and everyone's followed pattern, haven't they? But I think, so it just hit me sideways, if I'm honest with you. And it was, I was literally just crying all the time. Terrible. I'd turn up at work. I was working at the Nuffield in the cafe, and I'd turn up and Denise would be like, oh my God, what the hell's happened? What's happened to Craig? What's wrong with him? And I was like, no, there's nothing wrong with me. And it's just that kind of hormonal, irrational. There was no reason behind it, but I was like, just give me some vegetables. I'm just going to go and chop some vegetables. So, that's the kind of funny version of it. But
yourself, isn't it?
But I'd be on the school run, like literally, crying, anxiety. And I literally had started creating things in my own business, but I just wanted to dig a big hole and hide in it and not. So, and I just cracking on with it is not very helpful. It's not very helpful. So, I did that for a couple of years. And then I watched the other one, Mariella Frostrup program.
Yeah.
And then I started to click it all together, really, because even though you're in the menopause, you still don't really link all the symptoms. That's ridiculous. I didn't look into it enough. I didn't learn enough about it. And she said I had insomnia, anxiety, low confidence, low mood for 2 years. And then, then I figured it out. It's the menopause. So I was a bit the same. I was like, oh my God, these are symptoms of the menopause. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous because I knew, but I didn't. I was trying to crack on.
It's ridiculous that we don't talk about it, and that isn't really obvious. Half of the population are going to go through it. So why are we struggling through it, not trying to kind of go, piecing it all together ourselves? And like you say, for you, because maybe a lot of your friends weren't there yet, and it was a few years on for them because it was early for you. You're just having to navigate it yourself, aren't you?
Yeah. And I think
it helped.
Yeah, and I think the big thing with mental health and menopause is massive. Is I was at the Nuffield, right? There's doctors upstairs, and I'm saying, what should I do? And she's saying, well, you either take antidepressants or you take HRT. And that's a big message I would like to throw out there, is that antidepressants is not a treatment for the menopause, massively not a treatment. But even a doctor was telling me that. Do you know what I mean? So that I think that's a really, really important message to give people, is that is not the treatment, because it's not depression, it's a hormone imbalance, and antidepressants are not going to treat a hormone imbalance. But
kind of go to when doctors are seeing people come in, because you're saying about, maybe I can't get out of bed, I've got the low mood, I've got it's all the symptoms. But people, it should be, if it's talked about more, and if there was that education to doctors, that it doesn't have to necessarily be 50 plus or whatever, 55. It can be much earlier, because some people it can be a lot earlier.
Yeah. Well, it was. I was early 40s. I can't remember exactly what age. I forget about these things, but I was early 40s.
Blanked out all of that.
Yeah. But there are, doctors are getting much more informed, and Louise Newson's doing a lot to do that, to help doctors be trained more in it. So it's changing. It's definitely changing.
It is changing. It's starting to go. And I think people are, you are seeing this more on the TV. People are more, talking about it now. And that's why it's really important. All the stuff that you do as well. So when did was that your kind of like why, when you were setting up all of this support? And how did it start? Did you set up with the kind of coaching, or was it the Nurture Club? Tell us about what you set up to support women going through this.
Yeah, I guess it's been a bit of a journey to get to the menopause. It didn't really start out with the menopause stuff at all. I guess my nutrition background was the start of all the group stuff. So even though I never worked as a nutritionist for a short amount of time, but I was a bit terrified, if I'm honest with you, setting out on my own and confidence and all of that. So I do little groups of people. The OT in me, occupational therapist, did a lot of groups. So I was like, I'm going to run a little group. So I just help people figure out what a healthy plate of food looked like. And I took that to the Nuffield for years. I ran a food group with the nutritionist upstairs, making all these recipes and giving out recipes, sharing food. And I was just like, I didn't really know. I was like, this will turn into something someday. I just keep turning up. And so that's kind of that. And then that turned into some sort of like almost like a home economics thing. We did a group at Oaken's Kitchen in Warwick, and we had people cooking and all of that. And then as my journey went on, and I learnt so much from Dr. Chastady's podcast, I then was like, I just want to help people learn stuff. Let's do a learning thing. So I was like, let's create a supper club where people eat, but they also learn a lot about health and well-being, and people come together and they can share ideas. And so that was the supper club. And then because of all of that journey, I ended up with some event, and that's where I found out about health coaching. I was like, oh, what's one of those? Oh, what? So that was kind of, and then lockdown happened. So then I trained in lockdown. It was one of those moments where I was like, this is my opportunity. So I always knew I'd like group coaching. So I started out with group coaching, but then people are drawn to you, aren't they, with your own stories. And so that's how it sort of niched into menopause, really. And I think that's sort of, so it's been a journey. Yeah.
Yes, well, let's talk about supper club. So I went to my first supper club of yours this week, and you know what? It is really about the connection as well. There was so many layers for the supper club, and that I felt that benefit, you know, because it wasn't, you know, you're there and you're able to experience really nutritious food, which is fantastic. But also there was an inspirational speaker, which you really, you know, felt very inspired by. But the other layer on that is connecting with like-minded people. So, you know, you go in there and you might be a little bit deflated, or you might be feeling a little bit like, oh, it's been a stressful week, or it's been a stressful weekend, or the kids are kind of like driving me mad or whatever. Yeah. But when you come out, you know, everybody had a real smile on their face, and you can feel the energy lift. So, I mean, is that what you've seen, you know, the transformation from people entering into clubs and then coming out? What's the sort of real thing you get from it?
Yeah, I mean, I love that you just said energy there, because that sort of gives me shivers, because that's kind of where, that's a story from Monday night, actually. These two ladies who come, they were like, oh, we feel a bit low or whatever. We've not been feeling too great. We're hoping you're going to boost us up, Harriet. And I was like, okay, then that's not for me. Like, they then sat on the table with just amazing people. They listened to this amazing thing. And by the end of it, they were like, it shifts everything. So by the end of it, their energy was completely different, exactly how you've described it. Yeah. But yeah, I think we always wanted the food was always important, because obviously that's my background. So the food always has to be healthy, but it also has to be so they can recreate it at home. Feel really strongly about that. So that's why we give the recipes. But the inspiration bit as well, we really wanted a practical bit, because they loved the cooking version of, when I shifted from cooking to that, I was like, I've got to keep the interactive bit, because people love that bit. They wanted to get involved. So you missed it, actually, because you had to leave early. But on Monday, we did this amazing quiz. It was brilliant. That's the first time we've done a quiz. But there were some new people there who obviously were quite interested in nutrition, and they loved the quiz. They like shouting out all the answers. And so that was an amazing thing. So interaction is massive for me in all of it, because sort of my thing behind the whole thing is that we all learn so much from other people. That's why I love what I do. Like, it's just a complete privilege to do what I do, because I just learn. I'm just soaking it up. I walk around with, I don't know, hundreds of different people's voices in my head. I can't even begin to describe it, because I've learned so much from all these years of the supper club and all these amazing people I've met along the way. That does that make sense? Yeah, I guess.
I know. I felt that. I really felt it on there. And so, you know, thinking about that sort of transition to supporting people going through perimenopause and menopause, and just starting with the nutrition side, you know, because obviously you were into nutrition, into the health coaching. Is that where you started to see, actually, you know, if we're thinking about what we're putting into our bodies, that is making a difference for people going through this time in their life? And what did you see that kind of made the biggest difference, or what do you advise people?
Yeah, it's interesting. The 6-week program that I do around the menopause is around the sort of 4 pillars. So food, movement, relaxation, sleep. So we talk about, my job really as a health coach is not to overwhelm people with a load of information and tell them what to do. It's kind of the opposite. It's kind of, we're definitely not the expert. So the idea is that we bring out in people what they already know. We create the space, because everybody will be on a different place. So I always say, we're going to talk about all these different things, but I always remember it when I bought the book, Dr. Chatterjee's 4-pillar plan book, right? And I took it to friends of mine, and I was like, oh, where do you sit on that? And they were like, oh, I've got the sleep nailed, I've got the relaxation nailed, but I'm not very good at the movement and the exercise, movement and the food. And I was like, that's quite interesting, because I've got the food and the movement nailed. I'm not so good at the sleep and the relax. So everybody's at a different place. You see what I mean? So it's each week we'll talk about a different theme, but then people will create tiny little action steps that are relevant to them. And if, say, they don't need to do anything with their food, they might carry over something a habit that they want to create around relaxation, for instance, or
Yeah.
does that make sense? It's all about tiny little habits that they put in place. But food's a massive one, and it does have a massive shift for people. And often I'll ask which week was the most useful, and very often the food one comes up. And I find the food one quite hard to deliver because I just, I've been learning about food for a long time, so it's really difficult to just go, oh, let's just share a little bit. So I really try and manage that overwhelm for people with that, but food does a massive difference. Yeah.
So food, big difference. So what would you say for anyone watching or listening back is that their kind of key top things? It's like really, try not to put this in your body or try to add this to your diet. What's the kind of things that have been you've seen kind of things really make a difference to people?
Yeah, it's balancing blood sugar levels is really the key to all of it. So reducing refined carbohydrate, processed foods, and putting in foods that balance your blood sugar. So making sure you've got a balance of protein, complex carbohydrate, loads of fruit and veg. So it's that stabilizing your blood sugar has an impact on everything, your mood, your energy, everything. And once you start to feel that, obviously when you've got more energy and you've got better mood, you're more likely then to do some exercise or do something to look after yourself. They're all just it's a ripple effect on all of them. But and your sleep's going to be better. Everything's going to be better if you can balance that out. So it's just real food. It's really what people know. Just don't eat. Try and minimize processed food and eat real food. It's really
because processed food has such an impact on your hormones, doesn't it?
It
really does. And then just, we don't want things that are just going to make us skyrocket and then plummet, do we? We want to just try and keep in that sort of balanced way, which eating clean food really makes the difference, doesn't it? The thing is, it's difficult though as well, because when you are, that's what I notice as well, that sort of going through the month, and then when you're kind of perimenopausal, the month can just really extend. And then whereas before there was a kind of a couple of days where you're like, no, I need to eat stuff, sugary stuff. Now I'm finding there could be like a week or 10 days when I'm in that phase, and it's really quite hard. And you shouldn't be doing it, but in that sort of, you just, it just takes over, doesn't it? So I don't know whether you've got any kind of like tips for that when you're I need something.
No, definitely. It's all about the prep. All of it is about the prep. So if you've got other versions of healthy things in that are still treats, you could make yourself loads of healthy energy balls. You could have loads of sweet potatoes. You could have carby things that are better versions of that. So preparation is everything. So if you've got loads of stuff that's going to tempt you around, then you're setting yourself for a fail, aren't you? But
the kids cupboard is the worst thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Get rid of that.
I remember something we were just talking about before that we came onto this conversation, is then you ask yourself, how is that going to make me feel? This is really massive. I learned this from somebody who did a whole thing on intuitive eating on a call that we hosted a while back. And I thought it was really brilliant, because she said, sometimes I'm going to want to eat this big bowl of pasta or whatever, but then I ask myself, what am I going to do afterwards? So if I'm going to go to a meeting where I need to be really on it or whatever, that's really not going to serve me well. If I'm just relaxing, it's the end of the night, I'm just going to chill out with my kids or whatever, then that would be fine. So it's asking yourself that question, how is this going to make me feel? And, it could make you feel really rubbish. If you're feeling rubbish already and then you're going to do that, and that's going to make you feel more rubbish. But so it's not about perfection either. It's really important to say that, and not beating yourself up if you do go, I've just eaten that bar of chocolate, I must be the worst person in the world. All of that. That's not helpful either, is it? It's being kind to yourself in amongst all of it. But
I like that though. How am I going to feel afterwards? Because I often say like, oh, is this taking me a step closer to where I want to be or not? But I don't think that's kind of visualizing, that how am I going to feel afterwards really says to you, what do I actually need? Because you're right. It's like, if I'm going to feel really sludgy after this, I know I am. My stomach's going to bloat out. I'm going to feel really, I don't want to be doing that. And if you're visualizing yourself, like you say, maybe you've got to go into work and then you're going to be feeling even worse. That kind of really makes you kind of go, don't do it, and then what's the alternative? The preparation is really key. You've really hit the nail on the head there, because if you've got some other go-to that gives you a little bit of what you need, while it's still a sort of bit of a healthier option, you're not going to feel as bad, are you? And then you're not going to feel guilty, and you're also not going to feel rubbish. So that's kind of, preparation, and that kind of like how I feel. Yeah, I like that.
And also having other tools in your toolbox that are not just food, because we tend to rely on food for everything. Like maybe just pick the phone up and talk to your friend instead, or go for a walk around the block or whatever. Something else, have a nice bath, or I don't know, whatever that is that comforts you. It doesn't always have to be food, does it? And I think that's our automatic go-to. You could ask yourself, what else might help me rather than a bar of chocolate? I don't know. It's just
being conscious
in a minute. Yeah, conscious choices.
Conscious rather than being automatic, because the automatic might be straight to the cupboard. You're not even thinking. You're not even like conscious you're doing it. It's straight to the cupboard. So if you can be conscious and go, what else could I do? What's the alternative? What am I getting? If you're just asking yourself questions, so it is being conscious. That's probably it. That's the key thing. Be conscious. And I just wanted to touch back. I was really interested when you said about the 4 pillars, and you were kind of touching on those. But I'd really like to just understand a bit more about those. What are the 4 pillars, and what kind of things can you do through those? What do you tend to go through in those 4 pillars?
Yeah. So movement, obviously, in the menopause, absolutely crucial, because when we lose estrogen, we're much more risk of osteoporosis and all of that. So strength training, absolutely massive in the menopause, but also as a stress reliever, like yoga, any of those things are massive. So especially, I could talk for ages about kind of things like restorative yoga that people don't even know what that is, but it's
restorative yoga.
Oh, it's amazing. And I could tell you lots of brilliant people who do it, but it's really like a lot of people in the menopause can struggle with sleep really badly, and so it's difficult then to make that sleep up. So practices like restorative yoga can give you that amount of rest that's like the alternative of a night's sleep. For instance, I've heard somebody say to me, yoga nidra, which is that deep relaxation state, is the same as a whole night's rest. But restorative yoga is just these amazing poses that the yoga teacher will put you in. They put all blankets around you, bolsters. It's like you're being cared for. I can't even explain it, but it's the most
nurtured, which is
it's the most powerful practice. And so yoga I think is so crucial in the menopause. And for people if they like yoga, but I just think it's worth trying. So movement's really important. Sleep, we've just said, is a really challenging thing for people in the menopause.
Movement's one of the pillars. Sleep is another one there.
But
what's the kind of tips? So if you can't sleep, because often people will get sort of hot sweats at night, things like that. Sort of, is that the impact from the food that you're taking as well? Because obviously if you're having sugary stuff before bed, but a lot of people don't realize, they say, I won't have a coffee before bed, but they don't realize if you're having sugary stuff, I literally can't. I know that if I'm having a treat day and I'm like, it's good if I know that I'm going out for like a lunch, and I think I could have a dessert at lunch because I know that it's going to have worn off. If I have something sugary after about 3 or 4 o'clock, my heart is racing and I struggle getting to sleep. So I guess that's going to be even worse when you're going through menopause.
Interesting. Because you have a blood sugar spike in the middle of the night that wakes you up. Alcohol, same sort of thing with the liver or whatever. But so sleep hygiene is really key for anybody and those sort of things. But I think I love what you're saying, because it's just what's personal to you. It's a whole puzzle of, let's just figure out what did I do differently or whatever. But the hormones are so powerful in terms of all of that. So I take HRT, if I'm honest with you, and that has made a big difference to my sleep. And I can take progesterone at night, which really helps to calm the nervous system down. Magnesium, those sort of things, or Epsom salt baths, again, really rich in magnesium. The obvious stuff like reading before bed, the digital detox, and all of that. So there's loads of sleep hygiene that you can do, but sleeping one of my
session. Listen to a hypnosis. There's loads of stuff on YouTube, because that does. And I would say if you like doing yoga as well before that evening, it's kind of like all of those things.
Wind down.
you winding you down into that rest and relaxation, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, you know, I've listened to so many podcasts around sleep, and sleep is a bit of an Achilles heel for me, but I think you can get yourself a bit knickers in a twist, and then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you almost have to step back a little bit from it and not overthink it. And I think one podcast I heard, and I was like, oh, it's just hit the nail on the head, that you don't have a sleep problem, you have a stress problem. So this is where you come in. And I think stress is the biggest. So I think stress and food are the biggest areas for the menopause.
Like the other two pillars, were they food?
Yeah, I've forgotten where we've got to. Food, sleep.
We've got to movement, sleep, food.
Yeah, relaxation, stress. We haven't talked about stress.
Yeah,
stress and food, yeah.
You're so right about it's the self-fulfilling prophecy, because lots of people that I work with for insomnia, with hypnotherapy, what I'm saying to them is I stop making it all about sleep. You know, it isn't all about I can't sleep. It's about being really relaxed in your bed. It's about, releasing all the stress. It's more about that, because the more that you focus on, I'm not going to sleep, it just makes it kind of like, because remember, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between truth or fiction. So when you're saying, and then you can hear yourself telling people, I'm someone who struggles sleeping. And then it just becomes your reality.
Yeah.
Like that. So, I guess all of those pillars, they're all just so intertwined, aren't they?
Yeah. Everything affects everything else. But there's a brilliant book written by a local author called All You Need Is Rest. I keep buying it for people. But she talks about sleep affirmations, which you would like. It's like, my body is ready to sleep, or I'm looking forward to being regenerated, or whatever by this. You know, you just got these nice sleep. It's a brilliant book altogether, loads of ideas. But again, it's that mindset of just assuming that you're going to go and have a nice sleep. Don't overthink it. Just like, thanks very much. It's just, thank you for this lovely sleep I'm about to have, or whatever. But
that's the kind of affirmations I say, and then it is taking with that pressure off, because otherwise, because you're not sleeping because of stress on your body, whether it's physical stress, mental stress, and then you're creating even more stress, aren't you? So it's a sort of double-edged sword. And what about your kind of self-care routine now? What have you found that, right, if I do this and this really works for me, and I know that if I don't do it, I can kind of like, wobble off and I need to pull myself back on track. What works for you? Yeah,
lots of little things. So I suppose what I try and encourage people to do is tiny little things that take 5 minutes or whatever. So my morning routine, it's always a bit shaky if it doesn't quite go to plan, but there's always just a moment of small journaling massive for me. So it's that, like, I think I start almost in lockdown with that whole what's important today. And it's like, just pick 3 things that really that's important today. And not affirmations, gratitude, massive in, saying who I'm grateful for. I've nicked this for Dr. Chatterjee. There was 3 P's. Person, so person you're grateful for, pleasure, something you're doing that gives you a lot of joy, and promise, something that you've got to look forward to. So if I'm struggling for gratitude, I would just follow those. It makes it a bit simpler. And I often, from that, there's a Fern Cotton book about Bigger Than Us, and she talked about morning prayers, and I really love that. So I do often think about somebody that needs your heart that day, whatever that looks like. So it's almost like, please take care of whoever that might be, or things like that. So I have a bit of a morning thing and a mindset, some sort of small affirmation, like, I don't know, I'm perfectly imperfect, I'm exactly where I need to be right now, whatever. So your day's all set up. And again, using 3 letters. I use lots of letters, but meditation. Often I'll do the Calm app if I can, or some sort of breath work. Meditation, mindset, movement. So if I've got time, I'll do a tiny little bit of yoga, but generally there's movement in my day somewhere. That's a big part of my self-care, is exercise. Such a difference
to me. Such a difference. Like you were just saying just before here, I was like, I've had a really good day today. And I know I've had a really good day because I started it off with Qigong, which really works for me because it's the breath work, it's the moving meditation, it's movement as well. So that's why it really works for me, because I'm less of a just sit there meditate person, but moving meditations really work for me. And then I went for a run. And so it's kind of like where I get all my sort of creative juices flowing, you know, I know that that's going to be a good day. If I start a day and then took the dog for a walk, so that was perfect because I got to be out in the woods and I was putting my hands on the ground, you know, I couldn't take my shoes off because actually I was just listening back to Superhuman Summit, which is on at the moment, which is a Lee Holden kind of one of those free summits that you're listening to where they've got a speaker every day. And it's all about how do we become superhuman? You know, how do we shift our energy? You'd love it. It's really good. And Lee Holden, I know from all his work on Qigong. And there was someone on yesterday who was saying about EMF, so electrical magnetic fields. Because he started having a mobile phone. Every time a mobile phone would come close to his head, he'd get these horrible headaches. And so he had to like heal his own energy because he was so sensitive to EMFs. And he was saying one of the things that we can do to just quickly ground ourselves and feel better is touch the earth, you know. So it's kind of like you can kick your shoes off in the garden, or you can, you know. So that's why this morning I was like, right, he said, and I was like, hands on the trees, you know, just doing anything that's more natural rather than all of the bings and listening to everything from screens, you know, really. So I think because I was kind of feeling the earth this morning, I was doing my breathing, that set me up. And I knew that I was going to have a really good day. But you're right. All, you know, the Qigong practice I do is 7 minutes in the morning. It's only 7 minutes, you know. Breath work can just be 2-3 minutes, can't it? This doesn't have to take loads of time to set the day up.
It's massively important that it doesn't take time because you'll never do it. And that's a lot of my work is that loads of people just doing these tiny things, but consistency is key to all of it. Like it'll never make a difference unless you just do them regularly. So people say, I tried that once, it didn't work for me. And you're like, you've got to try it for weeks and weeks. You know, this is a practice, isn't it? You wouldn't expect to go to the gym and suddenly be, you know, all muscly from one time there. You've got to practice and see what works for you. You've got to give it enough of a chance to see if that works for you, haven't you? So brilliant. So what about what you do? And, you know, how can people get in touch with you if they want to hear about more, if they want to be supported by, you know, if it is menopause or peri-menopause, is that the Nurture Club or how can people get in contact with you? Probably the best way is just to start with a conversation, really, because then I can explain it a little bit more. And I do offer a gifted one-to-one coaching session because then you really understand how coaching works. But the Nurture Club really came off at the end. The idea of it was the end of the 6-week menopause group. So the menopause group is for 6 weeks. And obviously, as we know, you know, we don't create a habit in 6 weeks. Is the starting point. And that's why I love Nurture Club. So Nurture Club basically was supposed to be the feed on from that. So Nurture Club is every couple of weeks. So once every fortnight. And it started on Zoom because all my coaching was on Zoom. My 6-week programs are on Zoom, but that's all shifted now. But it's just incredible. These people come together and I was like, oh, we'll celebrate the year's anniversary or whatever, and then figured out we've been doing it for 18 months. But so it's that's the power. The power is the longevity, and I've seen so clearly from Nurture Club impermanence. Like people 1 week will be like this, and then life is like this. But the bottom line is, you know, everyone's going to be okay. It'll all be okay, and you know, and everyone's there to support each other. It's really incredible, actually, because one lady, it just made me quite emotional because one lady was struggling and one of the other people in the group had reached out to her and said, I really, really want to help you, and just spent the whole evening talking to, you know, they're all just there for each other. And we have a WhatsApp group in between, so people are cheering each other on if they're doing something in particular. There's a lot of nature goes on, lots of photographs of nature, and you know, it's just the most supportive thing. And I feel privileged. I'm kind of holding the space for that rather than, you know, it's again people learning from each other and cheering each other on. Like it's
that connection and that support, isn't it? That's the big thing. So the menopause group and then Nurture Club, that's all local now, is it, to Leamington rather than online?
So I can do both, but Nurture Club has stayed online for some of the people because some of the people don't live local. So it will, and it works for some people. They've got kind of used to it. But then the people coming out of the face-to-face menopause groups have struggled to go online. So I'm about to launch the first in-person Nurture Club. Very excited. Next Friday in Leamington. So that's going to be a new thing in the daytime on Fridays. every other Friday from next Friday. So that's quite exciting. But yeah, it's good just to talk and to do one-to-one coaching and see where people are at, rather than just throw people into a group and not know what's happening. So it's all an evolving, growing
coaching online, I guess, as well. So
yes, yeah.
That's right as well. Because what I'll do is I'll put your contact details on the Mental Health Warriors. I'll post on that after this, and we'll do the same on the Facebook group. So anyone that does want to get in contact has got all your details there.
Brilliant, thank you.
So it's been really good chatting to you. So good to, like-minded person, and that, and you know what, it's really great for those people that have been listening in, and anyone listening back, that it is about, there is people out there to support you. Just reach out, speak to someone. You know, it doesn't have to be a group or a coach or anything. Just reach out to a friend. It's about 100%. Just getting that support, isn't it? And then chatting to people. I think that's the importance of connection. We've talked about this is key.
Yeah. It's massive. Yeah,
it is, isn't it? Brilliant. So thanks everyone for watching back. I am going to finish the show with our ending clip. And then I will be back in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure on what day, probably back to a Monday, but I'll post about that anyway. So brilliant. Thanks, Harriet, so much for your time. And thanks everyone for watching.